survey article that came out from the Clinician transition a few weeks ago, the top two reasons for transitioning out were the insufficient compensation and the lack of opportunities for growth. And
Well, hey, Haley, welcome to the show. How are you?
hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's always nice to connect with previous students, but I'm excited about diving into the whole idea of transitioning out of clinical work into non-clinical and tech focused roles. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your clinical background, and kind of what brought you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Hayley. I'm an occupational therapist. I got my exercise science degree at Kennesaw State University in Atlanta, and then I went to Augusta University for my master's in occupational therapy and graduated in 2020 during the COVID years. And I worked for the past 3.5 years in the inpatient rehab setting, where I worked with patients transitioning them back into the community, doing a lot of family trainings, home evaluations, community reintegration outings, really just trying to increase the discharge to community rather than SNF. I worked with a bunch of diagnosis, neuro, ortho, complex trauma. So I got like really good experience in that setting. Um, Obviously, during that time, I noticed some gaps in the healthcare system as well. So just a lot of readmission rates from patients, poor health literacy, um, kind of missing the holistic aspect of care. So not really focusing on the patient's mental health, which was super important to me. I always tried to include that in my sessions. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's no surprise. Just like the survey article that came out from the Clinician transition a few weeks ago, the top two reasons for transitioning out were the insufficient compensation and the lack of opportunities for growth. And that ultimately is what it's come down to for me. But I guess the biggest thing was just I felt like a pull. My intuition was just telling me that I could be used for something greater. And I really wanted to advocate for the profession of OT and reach clients on a broader scale, not just in the clinical setting. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I always tell people like when you're in the clinic, not to negate it, but because it can be powerful, but you're often making like a one-to-one, it's a relationship, it's a life change. You might be making a real impact on one individual patient, but I think what I hear you saying is you're looking at kind of how do we make systemic changes, how do we influence populations of people, et cetera, right?
yeah, because
And
I had a lot of great one-on-one. I still keep in contact with a lot of my previous clients. I really do value those relationships that I made, but it starts to get a little like scary almost that like there's so many people out here that need help, and I'm only one person. How can I reach more people? So
yeah. And I'm assuming that's what prompted your desire to kind of step away because you stepped away from full-time clinical work, right? And now you're moving more towards something else.
yes, so I knew that I wanted to step away about a year ago, but you know how it is, you get
Yeah.
comfortable, you go to work every day, and I can't speak for everybody, but I'm so like type A and just like get really comfortable. And that's what I did. And, I started to get down on myself and was just thinking, if you really want to make a change, like you have to get uncomfortable. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to get uncomfortable to level up. And that's essentially what I'm doing. So I left my job in May to pursue full time, getting a job somewhere else, which is a full time job in
Yeah.
itself. But I went to the AOTA conference back in March in Orlando, and one of my friends that's an occupational therapist introduced me to Kylie, and she is an occupational therapist that transitioned to health tech. And her and Lauren Sheehan teamed up to make collective coaching. It's a 12-week cohort. We meet every other Wednesday, and it's a live course, and they teach us basically how to transition from clinical roles into non-traditional settings in health tech, and it's been great so far.
Yeah. Lauren's actually a previous guest on the show, so we'll link to that in the show notes. I like what you said um, about you didn't say this exactly, but growth comes from discomfort, right? Like if you're comfortable, if you're not feeling stretched, you're probably not growing in any real way, either personally or professionally. So I guess tell me a little bit before we dive into the program itself and kind of what you liked about it or things you saw about it. Um, Tell me a little bit about like maybe some of those, maybe it was specific fears or concerns or worries as you were planning on major like pulling the eject seat, ejection lever from full-time clinical work, because I'm assuming there's more than just the, oh, what am I going to do, right? Like there's, I'm sure, specific little thoughts or maybe anxieties that you had about it.
Oh yeah, so it always go it's always something deeper, right? So
Yeah.
really like on personal and professional level, I was kind of just looking at my life. I reached all of my goals per se, I'm so used to just having everything planned out. You go to high school, you get into college, then you pass the GRE, you get into OT school, you pass the boards, you get your job. And I was kind of looking around like, is this it for me? I don't really feel like, I'm growing that much. I want to be able to do something else kind of in all aspects of my life. And I've always wanted to just wait until everything is perfect to get started. And I'm realizing that that's not how life is, and that's completely okay. You don't have to know everything before you get started. And so that's just kind of like the common theme in my life right now, I feel like, in every aspect. So it's really scary, just like agreeing to do this podcast. I really wanted to do it, and it's not bad, like I'm surviving, like it's fine, like you have to be willing to get uncomfortable to level up.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell people like, and this is not my idea, it's somebody else's, but like never let perfect be the enemy of good. A lot of times we're there, we might be stretched to reach those skills or to take that next step. But it's the idea of wanting perfection that really holds a lot of people back. And then and there's the fear of failure too. Like what happens if I do this move, I'd make this move, it's public, like people know I'm quitting my job or they know I'm going to do this thing or the other. What happens if it fails, right?
Yeah, I think you just have to be willing to just, if it fails, it fails. And, that's one thing that's kind of making me feel a little bit better about it is like the hospital will always be there. Like,
Yeah.
I do love patients. I love working with patients. If something were to happen, like I still have my degree. Like it's not the end of the world. I rather take the chance and be stuck, where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The worst thing that happens is you go get a job. My wife and I, when I first got the clinic, and I was like, man, we're losing money, payroll's tight. She's like, what's the worst thing that happens? I was like, well, I guess I have to go like work for somebody else. And she was like, yeah, you can do that. It's true. Like
Yeah.
you can do that. Like worst case
Yeah.
scenario, you've got skills, you've got a license, you got a professional experience, you'll be fine.
Right.
So, tell me a little bit about then, you don't need to go in like all the weeds about the program, the coaching program, because I'm sure there's many of them out there for clinicians. But tell me a little bit about some of the benefits you've seen in going through a coaching program. Like maybe it's specific skills, maybe it's just a network. Like what are the benefits that you've experienced going through a coaching program?
Yeah, so like I said, I met Kylie at AOTA. She agreed to do a Zoom with me, like a meeting when she got back to Austin. And it was no gimmicks. Like she was like, I'm not trying to sell you on this program. I just want to like talk with you. And I was like, wow, that's so nice of her. And I looked more at the program. I didn't really look around at other ones. I know there's a lot out there, it seems like now. But what I liked about theirs was you meet live every other Wednesday for 12 weeks. So it's not something where they send you a PowerPoint and you go through it yourself. They're actually doing it with you. There's others in the program. I think there's 7 of us in this cohort. And really just like the sense of community that it builds, because we're all pretty much like the same. We're OTs, PTs, speech, and we all have like-minded goals. So it's nice that they do the one-on-one sessions. They also have where you can do one-on-one sessions with them, but they give us accountability buddies. So each week when we're not meeting for a live course, we meet up with our accountability buddy and kind of go through some things. But I think the biggest thing that I'm learning is that it's all about networking. It's all about the connections, building the community, which has been a challenge to learn. Like LinkedIn, we didn't really learn much about
Yeah.
that in school. We just made one and that was it. So it's kind of been a learning curve. I feel like I'm an older adult learning how to use social media for the first
Yeah.
time. Like it's good. Just like I said, stepping out of your comfort zone, building a community is definitely, I feel like one of my strong suits. I'm able to connect with people. I like talking to people. So it's just kind of getting in, building on their network, which is another great thing about the course is Lauren and Kylie have huge networks and they know a lot of people, and they're not afraid to connect us with people they know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, previously being at the university, I remember like I didn't teach this course, but it was like their professional development or it was like next steps career. I can't remember what the name of the course was, but like one of the things they made everybody do was everybody's going to get a LinkedIn and they're going to quote unquote like get ready to build their professional network. And I always saw it as like, holy cow, like LinkedIn, this is 10 years ago now when I was starting 12 years ago. Like I've applied for one job, two jobs in my whole career. One was for the VA and one was for the university because they were state agencies or governments and I had to go through the application process. Other than that, like LinkedIn has gotten me all of my consulting gigs, all my employed work when I was an employee. Like the power of networking cannot be understated. And yet the most we're doing for our students is like build yourself a LinkedIn profile and then start connecting with people. It's like, no, you need to be more intentional about it than just
Yeah.
putting your resume basically on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, especially for clinical, I've realized, I mean, there's definitely, since I've been on LinkedIn, more clinical people than I figured there would be. But a lot of my friends still that are OTs, they're like, LinkedIn, like, what do you do on there? And I'm like, yeah, it's like a whole different world. And I mean, essentially, if you are working a hospital job, like you don't need to go on LinkedIn. You can just apply, through another site. But
Yeah.
if you really want to network, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and it's funny, a lot of times like those opportunities come from like connections of connections, like those second or third degree connections where maybe you don't know them specifically, but you know somebody who knows them and they're either connecting you or they see you through that. That the first consulting gig I ever got was somebody reached out to me. They said, "Oh, so and so, said I should reach out." Like boom, done. Um, have they given you any like specific tactics or tricks or strategies for leveraging platforms like LinkedIn in this program?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm only in like tonight will be our third session. So I'm only about halfway through the program now. But so far, we've learned a lot about LinkedIn, reaching out to people, making connections, doing informational interviewing, which has
Yeah,
been great. I didn't know that people would be so willing just to like have
yeah,
a conversation with you, which is awesome. I really appreciate that. It's just great to build a community. And like you said, you just have to put yourself out there. It might be a company that doesn't even have a job listed, but if you have a conversation with them, they could either keep you in mind or maybe open something up for you. So it's just really getting uncomfortable and putting yourself out there.
yeah. It's funny, ever since, and maybe it's just the way that I'm wired. I like talking with people and meeting people, but
Yeah.
I've never had a problem like shooting somebody a message and saying, "Hey, you know what? Like, I'm interested in this area. I know you do it. Can we like hop on a call and I can just kind of chat with you about it?" But it is surprising to me how many, and I do this with students too. I don't know if you remember me doing this to you when I was leaving the university or something like that, but I always say like, if there's anything I can ever do for you is y'all go out on you start your clinical careers or your career in OT, just reach out to me, shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to talk. And I think I've done this to 250 plus students, and I think like maybe half a dozen have actually taken me up on it. It's the amount of people that just or maybe they're scared, like you said, they're uncomfortable about it. They don't want to, whatever it is, they feel fearful about maybe getting rejected. They're not going to reach out. And the people that actually make the moves that do something successful or like reach success, quote unquote, are often those people that they've taken the risk of reaching out and saying, "Hey, you know, can I have a conversation?" Worst thing that happens is they say no, and you're in the same position as you were before, but you're not going to be materially damaged by by reaching out, right?
Definitely. I think at least for me, I think I get in my head sometimes of just making sure it's like the perfectly written email, making
Yeah,
sure that I'm like stepping on any toes. And it's like, I think a lot of us just crave like vulnerability or authenticity now. It's just
yeah,
like just reach out, just be yourself. And I love personally connecting with people. So even if I know it's not going to be, a transactional thing, it's just like I just want to make connections, talk to people that have the same interests as me, and you never know what can come of it. So
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I remember the first few times I was writing emails, it's like going back and forth, it's like 30 minutes for like a two-line email. Is this right?
yeah, it's horrible.
The best framework I ever got from this came from a guy named Blair Enns. He runs Win Them Without Pitching, but he's a big fan of putting in there, like keeping it simple, two or three lines. And then you give whoever you're sending the email to the option to opt in or opt out. So at the end, it might be like, hey, Hayley, my name's Rafi. I'm an OT. I'm really interested in learning how you've, navigated this coaching program or something, whatever it is. And then he ends it with like, feel free to say no if the timing isn't right or if you're super busy, but would you be open to having a conversation about XYZ, about whatever it is? And most of the time, people will respond to that. They'll either respond with like, "Yeah, hey, I'm super busy now, but reach out in like a month or in 2 weeks, or I'm working on a big project now. Reach out after it's done," or they'll reach out and say, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." But that way, it doesn't feel like you're hitting somebody up almost spammy. It's like a real,
Yeah.
um, it's a real. You're giving them the option to opt in or opt out, and that just yields much more like a trust factor too. They don't feel like you're going to spam them with salesy stuff either,
It
which is
is
like
hard to
the worst
differentiate.
on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's hard to differentiate between the two. I'm learning, but I'm like, oh, this person connected with me, and then they automatically sent me a message.
Yeah,
I wonder if this is to everybody else. But
exactly.
another thing they did tell us to do that I thought was a good idea was kind of make it easy for the other person. So linking
Yeah,
in like a Calendly of your available time so they can just click it. So I've learned a lot. Like I made my own Zoom account, I made my own calendar. I'm like
nice.
moving up in the
I
world.
know your tech
Yeah,
stack is getting thick there. Yeah.
add it to the resume.
Awesome. Okay, so we kind of talked about the program, some of the strengths you've seen. Anything that, and maybe you're only halfway through, so you don't know if they're going to cover this or not, but anything that you'd like to see included in programs like this to help clinicians transition that you see is maybe missing or that you haven't gotten to yet?
I can't really speak on much just because I'm only
Yeah,
halfway through. I know there's a lot coming with like the resume building, but so far it's been great. I would say if anyone's looking for a coaching program, figure out like what you feel you need or how you learn best. Because I knew for me, if I just bought a program that was a self-taught,
yeah,
I wouldn't do it. I really need that one-on-one connection. Networking is huge. Making sure you're surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals that all want you to succeed. I think that's like the biggest piece too. Like my accountability buddy, I've never met
yeah.
her. We've just done 2 Zooms, but I feel like she's like a new friend and she wants me to succeed. If she hears something, she'll send it to me if it's not of interest to her. And just making sure you're really making these connections with people is really what it comes down to, I feel like.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something very important there. I think I can't remember the research when I was starting an online education company. I think at the time it was like 97 or 98% of those self-paced courses were purchased and not completed by people. Now, maybe the industry's gotten a little better, but the idea of you're just going to buy this course and I'm going to watch it, I'm going to learn it, I'm going to read it and then apply it just really has not borne out in any real meaningful way. So the fact that they've got you in a cohort that you're meeting live, like all of that is you're going to be moving more towards success. So
And
um,
I feel like I do have a little bit of an advantage because I don't have a job right now. So I'm putting
yeah,
all of my time into this. Everybody else has a full-time job and they're doing this. So like kudos to them. I don't know
yeah,
how they do that, but it is a full-time job looking for another job. And it's really important to hold yourself accountable though, because that's another thing I have to tell myself is no one's going to do the work for me. It is up
exactly.
to me. And I mean, I've really had to be hard on myself about that. But yeah, you can't just go through a program and expect to get a job. Like you have to put in the work to get the results. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, last kind of question here is, so how do you see um you're in the middle of this transition? So it's like it'll be nice to maybe connect with you in like a year or two and see where
yeah.
you've gone. But like how do you see the coaching program, kind of the steps you're taking now affecting the next season in your career? Because like you said, you're stepping away from clinical work. Maybe you end up back there at some point, but obviously you're seeing some kind of trajectory into the future, right?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I have like a set, I don't know like what the title would be for a career transition because there's so much out there. And
Yeah.
I really am open to any opportunity and experience. I'm also interested in traveling wherever, moving wherever. So that's kind of nice. I have a bunch of options. I guess really just like honing in on my interests and figuring out like where I want to go. So I really enjoy aging in place, like older adults, community reintegration, even like justice-based OT, mental health. So I'm really open to everything. I feel like the program is just going to help me make connections, reach out to people that have like-minded goals and maybe someone will even like see this or see a post on LinkedIn and say, oh, like maybe she would be good for this role. We can connect. So I'm really just trying to keep networking and seeing what's out there and what's available and just keeping my options open, my mind open to what all I can do.
Cool deal. Awesome. Well, what's like maybe one or two, I don't know, tips or pieces of advice you might give to a clinician who's maybe where you were 6 months, a year ago, where they feel like they want to get away from clinical work, but they're unsure about whether they should take that step? Like what's a piece of advice you'd give somebody in that situation?
For me, it was really hard because I mean, I love helping people. I love making connections with the patients one on one, but you kind of have to step back and just ask yourself, like, how is my mental health and how is this affecting me? And I know it's really cliche, but you have to be able to help yourself before you can
Yeah.
help somebody else. And I feel like I've learned that kind of the hard way, but I would just say take the leap. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, you can always go back to clinical work, but you might be able to find something that you love outside of that and something that will be better for you and help benefit other people.
All righty. Cool deal. Well, Hayley, where can people connect with you, check you
Yeah.
out
I guess
at
a
work?
LinkedIn. I don't know like what like they
Yeah.
could type. I don't know my LinkedIn. Maybe I can link it to you in the show
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah,
Sounds
we'll put
really
it in
cool.
the show notes for sure. That'll be
Okay, cool. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.